Hi, everyone. Welcome to the next episode of the Roast in the Ceilings podcast, where we talk about all things feminism.
Yup, and today we're recording after a very long day because Isabella and I just finished a IB biology midterm.
Yay!
Woo! And a part of the IB biology curriculum is learning about the menstrual cycle. And last night, while I was up grinding and studying and revising the menstrual cycle, I took a moment to think to myself, why am I studying this? Why don't I already know this? Like the back of my hand. What is going on? So today we're taking the time to kind of talk about what the menstrual cycle really is and why it's so unknown when it affects 50% of the population.
Absolutely. I love that. So, to start us off, as IB biology students, we're just going to give you our quick rundown because our teacher always says to practice active recall.
Mhm.
Okay, let's talk the menstrual cycle just to bring us right into it. So, first we start menstruation, right? That's days 1 to 5. The uterus lining sheds, and that's your
Mhm.
period. The hormones
Boo.
follow. That's estrogen and progesterone. And in the follicular phase, that's days 1 to 13, the follicle stimulating hormone causes a follicle, that's the egg, to mature. And then estrogen, and a type of estrogen, estradiol, increases, and that rebuilds the uterine lining.
hmm And then when you hit around day 14, again, these days are going to be different for everyone. This is just a typical one. This is going to cause ovulation because your luteinizing hormone surges. This is what triggers the release of the egg from the ovary. Now, following this is what we get into the luteal phase, which is days 15 to 28. And the corpus luteum forms from the old egg that just bloop, that just fell, and this is going to continue to secrete progesterone. And now the progesterone, as Isabella mentioned earlier, maintains your uterine lining, just in case you do get pregnant. But if there's no fertilization, the corpus luteum, it breaks down, your hormones drop, and then it recycles back to the beginning.
Well, now that we know the science
Mhm,
behind the menstrual cycle, I think it's definitely time to talk about
mhm,
what we're seeing externally and what
mhm,
we're feeling every day, right? When
mhm,
we're actually seeing the blood happening, what's
mhm.
going on?
Exactly. But if you guys did like our little crash course, please comment down below. We will be sending our IB biology teacher this. Think she would love it. I just want to start off by saying, although I didn't know what any of these hormones actually did, I didn't know what FSH was, I didn't know what LH was, I didn't even know what odestrol was a thing. Like, I didn't know any of these things. But I had heard the phrase luteal phase. On TikTok, on social media, I've seen people say, oh, I feel really bad during my luteal phase. Oh, during your luteal phase, you'll feel like this, like this, you'll look worse, you'll feel worse, blah, blah, blah. But despite this phrase being kind of like tossed around, I felt like there was still such a lack of education behind it. So like, why do we think this is the way it is?
Absolutely. I mean, it's just wild how what women's normal is. Well,
Mm-hmm.
it's seen as abnormal a lot of the times, right? Because no one talks about it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much stigma behind talking about your
Mm-hmm.
period, talking about menstruation, as I'm sure you have felt yourself as well.
Mm-hmm. For sure. So our whole episode today is going to be trying to dismantle the stigma behind talking about periods around menstruation because honestly, I will never understand why it is stigmatized, but it definitely is. This is seen a lot everyday life. Sometimes I'm still victim to it. Just a little anecdote. Recently, I was away at a hotel. I had to share a room with a couple of the girls that I didn't know that well, and I was on my period during this. And when I got into a room, met these girls, I found it necessary to be like, "Oh, by the way, guys, I am on my period. So like, I'm just sorry if you see any like menstrual products in the bathrooms, any of this stuff. Like, I just apologize in advance." And they're like, "No, no, no, girl, don't worry. Like, we're all girls. Don't worry about it." And I thought like, so why did I feel the need to apologize for that? I'm like, why is that something that I have to feel? So it had to make me think about it. I had to think about like that stigma is so like ingrained in you.
Oh, that is so true, and such a
Mhm.
recent example too. I'm glad.
Mhm.
I mean, I remember having my first period, and that was a crazy experience because it
Mhm.
was during school, during class time, as I'm
Really?
sure a lot of girls had that experience. And I
Mhm.
remember just being like, "Oh, what is that?" And
Mhm.
being super, super embarrassed, right? Doing the very classic putting your sweater around your waist and like trying to scoot on out of the classroom. And it's like, this is a natural thing. Every
Mhm,
girl experiences this. So why is it so difficult to
mhm,
talk about? Why is it so difficult for us to have a conversation about it and ensure
mhm,
that we're not feeling shameful or dirty
mhm.
like a lot of times we feel like we should?
I feel like that the answer to that question is definitely going to have a lot of factors, right? It's not something we can just answer for you objectively, but I do want to say that I feel like most of it stems from the way young girls are educated about menstrual cycles. Although, like, at least for us, at least from where we're from, at around grades, what, six, seven, eight-ish, you get pulled out of your classroom, you go to a little gym, or stay, I don't know, stay in your classroom, and your teacher gives you a little talk. They give you a talk about how your bodies are going to change, about menstruation. But I genuinely feel like they either do it so wrong where that stigma is going to continue to be embedded, or it's going to be like not enough information where you're like, oh, so what did you even tell me? Because, like, your little classroom example, like getting your first period, I feel like anyone should have been prepared enough already by sex ed curriculums to not be freaked out and know what was going on.
I feel like the whole culture
Mm-hmm.
around periods needs to shift, and it's so deeply ingrained that it's difficult to change with, just one class, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we're always going to have this feeling of, oh, I shouldn't talk about this. This
Mm-hmm.
is, there's a lot of cultural
Mm-hmm.
taboos in the household. There's a lot of young boys as well being raised to want to stay away from those topics, and I feel like just opening it up to all of us as a whole is super important.
For sure. And I just feel like that's the thing where like it can't be seen, we can't keep perpetuating the idea that it's something like shameful or like dirty or like weird about it. I remember how I was told about periods. This might not be the same for anyone because I did go to like a private Christian school during this, so this might just be a me thing. But how it happened was we had our class, we had only our girls, we like banned the boys. I was like, no, this is a topic that your ears can hear about. We had our moms come in and they had to give it to us, and afterwards they were like, oh, you guys should all go out to dinners with your mom because this topic was just so heavy and traumatic and hard to hear. And I feel like that even if they do mean well, I feel like they just keeps perpetuating this idea of how like taboo it is, how like horrible this is to hear, and like your life is over now that you have to go through natural cases. And I feel like it's just one of those things where it's like these tiny little things that we implement in daily lives does perpetuate the stigma. And what you talked about how boys are also taught to kind of perpetuate this idea, even if they're not being harmful, is so valid. Because I've had guy friends before where I will talk about like being on my period because I'm trying to dismantle that stigma, and they'll just be like, oh, like oh, and it's like they're not trying to be like bad people. It's just they've also been raised with the stigma of like, oh, this isn't something that you should talk about.
For sure. Even when we're learning this topic in class,
Mm-hmm.
we were just talking about this, right? We've
Mm-hmm.
already seen so much stigma around just learning about the scientific
Mm-hmm.
version of the menstrual cycle, right? I mean, I remember, when I had my first terrible cramp, the first time I ever felt that before, and I was left feeling just weak. And I didn't want to tell anyone even though I was in so much pain because I felt like, I wasn't allowed to be. And I think that a lot
Mm-hmm.
of girls share that feeling as well, that, the period makes you weak. One time in the month, you're emotional and you're crazy and really, that is very disempowering as a woman.
Mm-hmm. I just feel like the whole idea of emotions, like, well, yes, like we can acknowledge that hormones can affect emotions, but like I feel like that whole like stereotype was like, oh, you're on your period, you must be so emotional. Does so much harm, and like I just don't. There's no way I can think. I'm like, how do we even fix that right now?
Absolutely. And I mean, like even beyond the discussions that we're trying to open up here, like all around the world,
Mm-hmm.
there's different circumstances, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we're really lucky to be in Canada where we have all of these resources as women. Like I'm part of a different health organization and we recently did a project in Tanzania, right? And they don't have access to pads a lot of the time. They don't have access to
Mm-hmm.
clean water a lot of the time. They don't have access to painkillers. So what happens when they're under cramp and
Mm-hmm.
they're in extreme pain, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's not a lot of access to services. So I think recognizing that it
Mm-hmm.
keeps girls out of school and it's not only,
Mm-hmm.
period pain, it's all the things that come
Mm-hmm.
with pain, like not being able to go to school.
Mm-hmm. That's so important to mention because all of this I feel like still stems from, as we talked about, that taboo, that like idea that it's something dirty and shouldn't be talked about. Because if it was widely talked about, we would have found solutions. Have you ever heard people mention like, oh, if guys had periods, they would be solved by now? I've heard that. Um, so it's definitely true. Like I feel like we have to keep talking about this, to keep educating ourselves, to keep destigmatizing it is so important, especially to those girls in like third world countries who might not know that this is a normal thing to go through. But again, like even though we do live in a first world country, these topics of like um medicine and like the side effects of periods are still very widespread. For example, a lot of women, even that I know personally, have had to gone through what a lot of people call medical gaslighting, where they'll have problems like PCOS, they'll have problems with endometrium, they'll have serious issues, endometriosis, all of these things where like they will have actual like crippling pain, they can barely get to work, barely go to school, and if they go to a doctor, it'll just be like, oh, it's just your period. Oh, it's just cramps. You're fine, right? So I feel like again, this is all still down to a lack of education. If we're able to educate women on these are things that could be happening to you, they could get solutions a lot faster.
I really love that point. I mean, yeah, I feel like growing up, there hasn't been around
Yeah.
enough discussions around menstrual health,
Mm-hmm.
and I think definitely it starts from when we're young girls. So I
Mm-hmm.
definitely echo that point.
For sure. I saw someone bring up a point earlier that I was like, huh, that made me think. Because that you just brought up the word menstrual health, which is such an important topic, and that's what we're talking about today. But oftentimes the term menstrual health is kind of separated from just health, right? A lot of the times menstrual health is seen as such like a little sub point of health. And it's still so weird to me because it's such a widespread, so common, once a month thing that everyone goes through. Not even once a month. Your cycle is all you're continuous. You're always going through it. So why is it not considered like a main part of health?
Oh my gosh. Absolutely. I mean, you hit that right on the nail, right? Like, I think I work with a lot of women's health researchers, and what I hear again and again and again is how little funding goes towards women's health.
Mm,
And it just shocks me every
mm,
time. Um, Especially, in intersections of that as well, like BIWAC research.
mm-hmm.
There's just not enough funding going towards women's health. And I think every time I hear that, it just crushes my heart because, so many people are going through these issues, just like you said,
Mm,
like endometriosis, as well as menopause. There's just not enough,
mm,
especially for older women as well. There's just not enough
mm.
awareness around it.
And again, just drawing this back to the fact that women are 50% of the population. This is not like an issue that affects like a tiny little bit of the population that's not even like an issue. This is something that everyone goes through. Your sisters, your friends, your mom, your aunts, your cousins. Every single woman you go through is going to be going through these issues. And still, like Isabella said, we lack funding, we lack research, we lack the resources. Um, so by continuing advocating and pushing for these, I feel like it's the best thing we can continuously do.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of our viewers are young girls,
Hmm.
right? And I think oftentimes when we talk about these issues, it sounds like, oh, these are these gigantic issues that, oh my gosh, it's never gonna get better, right? But I think I wanna emphasize that that is not the point that we're pushing across
Hmm.
at all. It's the point that, it starts with you. You can start talking about menstrual health with your peers. You can start educating yourself on menstrual health. And I think that it is, don't worry. It's not too big to tackle.
Hmm.
We can do it as a collective, for sure.
I can't emphasize that enough. Like, while it is a big issue, it's a big issue. We're saying it is a big issue. When people say it starts with you, sometimes I roll my eyes a little bit, but no, it does. It genuinely does start with you. Because all this stigma, all this lack of education, all this lack of resources, the lack of funding, it all comes down to culture. That is the only reason we don't have those resources, and that's the reason why we're not making progress right now. It's this I've seen people call it it's just a period culture where some even from women, periods will be kind of like talked down upon. We'll try to make it seem like less. By going like, oh, you'll take symptoms like cramps, like even like debilitating cramps, fatigue, migraines, emotional like distress, like all these other symptoms that you women go through on like a monthly basis will become like the butt of jokes. They'll become minimalized, not taken seriously. Like, oh, she's just on her period. Oh, it's just my period, so I don't have to worry about it. This is culture. this is all culture. This is something that people grow up with, and we can't really let that happen if we want people to start taking menstrual health seriously.
Yeah, I mean, take care of your body,
Hmm.
right? I feel like that's
Hmm.
almost the real bottom line here.
Hmm.
I can't imagine the amount of times I've heard women in my life say, you know, I'm just on my period. I can keep pushing through. I can keep pushing through. But I think we just all need to remember to take a pause
Hmm.
as well. Take a
Hmm.
pause, take care of yourself, and
Hmm.
make sure that, your body comes first.
Hmm. And when we say we should try to be advocates in our own life, sometimes that just means for you. Sometimes advocate for yourself. When it's whether it's like in a medical situation, speak up and be like, "Hey, these things are affecting me. I don't think it's just a regular cycle." Whether it's to your friends and to be like, "Hey, like let's not joke about stuff like that." Whether it's to honestly anyone, teachers, bosses, family members, take yourself seriously, take your health seriously. That is being an advocate, which is such an important thing right now because we don't see a lot of advocacy in the mainstream media, in pop culture. And if you guys are tuned into the podcast a lot, you know that especially me, I love to talk about pop culture on here. And it's really disappointing to see that there's not a lot of menstrual representation on there. I want you guys to think, right? Name a movie in your head, name a show in your head where you see a period being showcased in a light that isn't negative. I can't really think of one off the top of my head because oftentimes, even in coming of age movies, when periods and menstrual cycles are shown, it's often like the butt of the joke. It's, oh my God, this is the episode where she gets her period in front of everyone. That's the only really the time we see this kind of representation, which is kind of sad. Like I've seen this joke for years now, where people talk about the Hunger Games. Reminded me of this because the new book came out. But they'll be like, "Oh my God, Katniss was in the wild for so many months and she didn't get her period once." Yeah, she didn't get it once. Oh, you could have written in there somewhere that she did get like a pad from a sponsor. How was it not mentioned once? So like this lack of representation in the media, I do feel like it could be changing as we like become more open-minded, but I just feel like we need more of it.
For sure. I hope we keep seeing more shifts
Hmm.
towards opening these conversations, and definitely media is a large part of that,
Hmm.
right? I mean, we reflect what we see in the media all the time.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I love that you brought that up.
For sure. And again, another topic we love to talk about on here is intersectionalism. And as always, always, race is going to play into feminism here, because race will affect the care you get for your period. I recently found out that black and brown women are way more likely to have PCOS, fibroids, but they're still likely to have worse care access than other women, and less likely to be believed when they go to medical professionals about their issues. And that's just kind of mind boggling to me. And I feel like this is the kind of information we need to keep in mind to be able to advocate for ourselves correctly.
For sure. That is such
Mhm.
a great point to bring up.
Mhm.
I'm really glad you did so. To our viewers, stay healthy. We hope that you and everyone in your life the best of health, and
Mhm.
please take some time this week to, pay attention, be
Mhm.
aware of your
Mhm.
body, and just take a second to actually feel what's
Mhm.
going on in your body. It's okay to take a pause. Please take care of yourself.
Mhm. And the most important things you can do right now if you're feeling lost and scared and you don't really know what to do about this lack of education is to educate yourself, right? Find a textbook where it teaches you the signs of the menstrual cycle, no matter how annoying it was for us to learn it for our midterm. Educate yourself, educate yourself, educate yourself. The more you know about your own body, the more you're able to advocate for yourself, advocate for others, advocate for those who cannot. So just keep, honestly, know as much as yourself as possible and honestly keep talking about it, right? The more we talk about it, the more we're able to decrease that stigma. We've came on here today, we've told you a couple period stories. um Maybe we have more, we'll see. um and that's us trying to decrease the stigma for you guys too, right? We made a vlog about a year ago now where we do talk about periods and how to survive them in death. We were in a Walmart, it was a fun vlog, you can find that on our channel. What we're gonna try, I think we should do more of that, honestly, because I feel like us destigmatizing it as much as we can on our own platform will help people hopefully destigmatize it in their own lives.
Oh yes, please go watch our other period
Mhm.
video. Please, please, please. It was so much fun.
Mhm.
And thank you so much for listening today and DM
Mhm.
us. DM us your period stories.
Yeah, monster stories. We might just do an episode where we read your stories to show other people that it's normal.